Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Cleantech Lithium PLC Investor Update. Throughout today's recorded meeting, attendees will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time just using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please submit your questions at any time and press send. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and as usual, I'm sure that the company will be most grateful for your participation. Daniel, I'd now like to hand over to your good self. Thank you.
Mark, thank you as always. Ignacio, good to see you. I'm currently in Dubai. It's running at about 8 o'clock this evening. You're in Chile. You're joining us from Chile today.
Yeah, Dan, great to see you too. Yeah, I'm in Santiago at the moment. Midday, 12 p.m. here.
I appreciate you, and I'm sure all the shareholders do, for making the time and getting on board. So look, there's a lot to unpack here. So really, we've got a whole bunch of questions, but obviously, we had been hoping and working towards the fast track process with the government on the CEOL application, and we were unsuccessful on that in our initial one. I think it'd be quite good to take a step back, and if we could, Ignacio, explain exactly what the requirements were, where we have not been successful on some technicalities, well, the process that you're currently looking at to address that. And then most importantly, when I've been talking to a number of shareholders, is obviously there's a standard normal process, which we believe will, the company would be then get the license through, but obviously it's not as quick as what we were hoping to do in terms of moving forward. So could I ask you just to step back, and we've got a whole bunch of questions that I'll jump into. And also actually, obviously you've been a month in, so we'll have a broader conversation on a few other points of your understanding of what you've discovered so far and what you think is exciting for the company and what you think is to be addressed. But let's take a step back first of all and just go through what the requirements were in the polygon with respect to the fast tracking for the CEOL application.
Okay, so this expedited or fast track application to the CEOL had several requirements. Mainly speaking, one was related to capital, the other one was related to the ownership of a certain percentage of mining property within a polygon that was defined by the state. And also it had to do with the experience of the company and its executives in the lithium industry and to develop a project. So the reasons are the arguments that the government has given us to not accept our application at the moment are not in the public domain, but we've addressed them. We engaged a firm that I've worked with before, very specialized in administrative and public law, and we've been addressing those concerns that the government has very thoroughly, I think, in a very positive manner. And we're in the following weeks, we're planning to have we already have a few meetings scheduled with the government authorities, with several ministries, in order to explain our arguments, why we believe that Cleantech Lithium does comply with the requirements, and more broadly with the founding principles of the lithium strategy, and why then our CEOL application through this expedited process should be accepted.
So just to clarify, so we have our license areas that we have, which we've done our previous scoping study for, and we're doing all the work into the PFS, which we hope to have imminently. And then, so the government put forward a series of proposals for people to bid for the fast track one, and over Laguna Verde, their polygon, so their reference area, which my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they arbitrarily drew, doesn't match exactly to where we have specific licenses which have been built up over time in a patchwork of shapes, etc. Is that correct?
Well, we do have, as you say, Dan, we do have significant ownership in the whole area, in the polygon that the government drew. We believe it doesn't really reflect the resource, and we've done our hydrogeological modeling and where most of the reserves are. So yes, we have discussed modified polygon where we have significantly over the minimum that the government is requiring.
Okay, so just so that everybody understands, the shareholders, so we have our license areas which cover a large chunk of Laguna Verde, and we've been doing a lot of work. And the government then submitted an application over it, which is a polygon, which was an arbitrary done shape, which doesn't match to our exact licensing. So it's not that we don't have the licenses, it's just the shaping of our licenses and where we think the actual resources are doesn't match to what the ministry has published as they're effectively their square.
That's correct. That's correct. Then.
Okay. And so we're in discussion with them over, and my understanding is slightly as part of that square that they have covers areas that wouldn't be prospective licenses anyway.
Exactly. What we have is the most attractive area around the salar and where the resource that we've defined is located. So the most important areas are covered by our licenses.
Yeah. And is it correct? I thought some of their area that they put forward doesn't even actually, we don't even think there would be lithium in some of that polygon that they've published.
Yeah. How the government defined the polygon is beyond our understanding. In general, they didn't have a lot of information to define the polygon, and that's why in principle they always said it's been said that it's a referential polygon that can be modified after an indigenous consultation process or after dialogue or negotiation with the applicant.
So my understanding, again, Ignacio, correct me anywhere if I get wrong, is that we've picked up all the licenses which we think is the most productive and the most valuable area. The government has produced a square which is over a larger area. And one of the requirements was that you had to have 80% of the polygon. And we don't believe some of that area is particularly that valuable, and some of it indeed may not even be relevant to lithium. And so we failed to meet the 80% of owning the licenses on the polygon because their polygon area is larger than where we think the lithium is.
And it's in fact different. We have licenses that are outside of the referential polygon area that do have access to the resource that were not considered. So it is not a smaller polygon, it is just a different one.
Okay, so part of our process is to go back and then go into detail with the ministry to explain why their polygon doesn't really match what would be productive and therefore in the government's interests in terms of their strategy to increase lithium production in the country for junior new entrants coming in.
Right. So the appeal process, the appeal that we already filed should be reviewed by government and answered within 30 to 45 days. So we're looking at an early June response from government. And our strategy is during this period, from the filing of our appeal and before the response, we're going to be engaging the most relevant authorities related to this process to explain, among other things, the polygon, but also, again, to explain that we've been the company that our project is the most advanced project in Chile, as we've done not only substantial exploration, we have defined our resource, we have a hydrogeological model independently prepared that justifies that. We have done downstream processing of our brines in our pilot plant in Copiapó. And then we have further gone downstream in US with conductive all the way down to battery carbonate of high purity. So, and we've also engaged, and I'd love to talk about my visit to Laguna Verde later, Dan. We've also engaged with the indigenous communities very early on the process, and we have a very good and positive relationship with them. And actually, I don't want to say the only project, but it's one of the few projects in Chile that has decisive community support.
And not only that, my understanding in obviously catching up with Stephen Gordon yourself is that there's some concern with you on the chat room saying us that we don't have the relationship. My understanding is the conversations with the government is that the government is very keen for the project to go forward. They're very keen for clean tech to have the project to move forward, but they are going by some technicalities of the polygon versus it. So can you comment and give any reassurance to our shareholders about sort of the relationships and the government's desire to see this go forward and the relationship with clean tech? And then maybe we could just discuss, in the event that the appeal was not successful, what the standard process would be to go through the normal tendering process, etc., to get it, and how the fact that we have all the licenses, which would effectively block anybody else being able to come in anyway.
Yes, the government has been very supportive all along. It's been, I would say, a very legalistic and simplistic response to our application that and that's why we believe there is a lot of merit in reviewing that refusal, and that's why we filed the appeal. We believe we have very strong arguments to justify our case and to get a different response from the Ministry of Mining. Very early on my incorporation to Cleantech, I already met with some authorities, and they are all very supportive. They understand that we are very far on the path to production. We are about to deliver a PFS. We are, as I said, with a resource that has been defined, and they see that our project could be the next a project to be built in Chile. In fact, we had a meeting yesterday with some folks in Australia, and they were telling us that the Chilean ambassador in in Australia had she went to a seminar and she was speaking about investment in Chile, copper, lithium, and the only company that she mentioned as and highlighted was Cleantech Lithium. So all the signals that we've seen are very positive from government, and we are very optimistic.
While there's a technical legalistic failing to do with the interpretation of how they've done it, that should in no way be interpreted in terms of any negativity in terms of relationship with either the ministry, the government, or their desire to see the project or Cleantech move forward, which is obviously some of the concern and speculation. But my understanding is we're purely into legalistic detail of definition.
Yes, your understanding is correct, Dan. It is extremely legalistic and nothing political about the decision, and we believe we have good arguments to overturn that legalistic decision.
Okay, there's a couple of things. So somebody put in and elaborate on the tender process, etc., and fast track application for the potential cost. I don't think where there would be a cost, there wouldn't be funds needed for a bid. So I'm not quite sure on that, but there's a lot of things with a similar version. So we'll go across here. I want to make sure that I do try and address shareholders' questions as much as we could. So I do one second there, Ignacio. But who is the ultimate? Who are we appealing to? Is it the legal department of the ministry? Is it to the Minister of Mining? What is the appeal process? And who is it within the government that we appeal to? And then what is the timeline for them to consider that?
Okay. Yes, the authority that will be signing the response will be the Minister of Mining. But the reality is that the lithium strategy is driven by a commission comprised by several ministries, and that's why our strategy is to engage with the most relevant authorities within that commission, and not only with mining, but of course mining is going to play an important role. The process is somewhat lightly regulated. It is as well somewhat fast, so we should expect to have a response, as I said before, early June. The first 15 days of June, no later than the first 15 days of June.
Okay. So,
and as just as an additional context, as I mentioned, we engaged very highly respected law firm here that supported us with as we discussed before. It is a legalistic response, so we developed a lot of arguments against those very weak, I would say, arguments that the ministry gave us, and we believe that we prepared a very strong appeal, and now are going to start engaging with the stakeholders in order to let them know our view about the case.
I know from our conversations yesterday, and then with Gordon and Steve, I mean, we're very happy with the arguments. Ultimately, though, Chile is a very rule and legalistically bound country and government, so we're into technicalities. And obviously, I've been doing mining for 25 odd years now. You hope for the best, but it's really arbitrary. And even if the best will of the world, they want you to do it. If the rules are there, sometimes we have a problem. So we're working on it. We think that's solid. Now, if we don't get that through, obviously we're just into a straight normal one. Could you explain for the shareholders and interested parties how that works? And I think what everyone wants to understand is, given that we have all these licenses, what is the risk that somebody else could come in? What are the qualifying aspects that you need to put forward? Obviously, we've done all the work. We have the license areas. We have the support of the community. what is the process? When will they announce that? And what do you think is a realistic risk, or how much assurance can you give to shareholders that there isn't a risk in terms of somebody else coming in to trying to piggyback off the work that we've already done?
Okay, so even though the government has not given a lot of details about the tender process, we do know that it will be, once it's launched, it will be finished within this government's term, which is March 2026. We believe it should be awarded even earlier, during this year, so before December, probably. They have said publicly that licenses are not going to be a fundamental requirement, though they are going to be important. But we have a unique position in Laguna Verde. I honestly don't see how another party could come and try to bid for Laguna Verde with the position that we have regarding the licenses and also all the work we've done.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
even
that's
though
my
there
view as
might
well, but
be
I think,
other applicants, we would have the best opportunity, and we would be in a privileged position anyways.
okay. Finally qualified companies able to bid into all state company shares too. Okay. There's something about pre-subscribed and permitted one, but yeah, most of that is fine. Now, so the other one was the financial resources. So one of the requirements was an arbitrary number to show 30 million of equity. Now we have spent well over $30 million. I mean, we spent over 30-40 million pounds in country. But the other one is, I think there's a technicality in my discussions with Steve and Gordon, is that at the moment we have put the funds from the topco into Chile as debt, because that allows then, once the company was, and that's standard course of procedure when you're going from topco to subsidiaries, is that you put it in debt, which allows then, when the company is revenue generating and makes profits, to repay that debt in a tax efficient way rather than out of post-taxed dividend income, effectively, is what you'd have to do. So my understanding is we're also looking to demonstrate that, but our fallback position would be that we could convert that loan from Cleantech PLC into equity in the subsidiary company. Is that correct as well, for understanding?
What the government wants done is assurance that the company that gets a CEOL awarded will develop the project. And that's been our argument, and those are the lines that we are using. It is pretty standard, as you say, how the company has funded the local entity to develop this project. We have raised well above what the government requirements were, and once the project has the CEOL, we've already publicly said we're looking into and in the process of listing in the ASX. We also have AIM listing, and we will be raising capital and looking for a strategic partner to develop the project. So all of these are arguments in front of the government.
I think so. So on that one is, so that they understand that companies will raise capital at the appropriate time when you get that, and that's most likely to be debt and project finance and bring in strategic partners. And some of the conversations I have with individual shareholders is what they're looking for is the comfort that we have in the wider board there, in people such as Steve and his experience. Because obviously Steve is hugely respected in the country from having previously run Escondida and Collahuasi. So the relationships there, and those started again with very small projects of 20-30 people, and then built up to teams of several thousand. And Steve brought in the external financing on that. So one of the concerns you're saying is, how can we show the balance sheet? In my experience, governments and ministries are not looking for a company to show that they have it. Otherwise, no junior company would ever get a license anywhere in the world. What they're looking for is to demonstrate that you've expended the capital in country, and then to look and show that you have a clear path, which will be a combination of project and debt finance and bringing in a strategic partner. And that comes down to competency. In many ways, the ability to bring in external parties far outweighs than having a company that might have $500 million on the balance sheet, but doesn't necessarily have the expertise to put a project into production.
And that's why, Dan, one of the other requirements that the government said was regarding the experience of the people that were in the company in order to develop projects. And in that regard, Steve's experience is very highly regarded, as you mentioned, in the country, as well as our other board members.
So trying to address the questions I can. And sorry, everybody, there's a lot of overlapping and various other things. But so put in, for a public tender process, when any technically and financially qualified company be able to bid? They can seek to, but obviously we have the licenses, and those licenses are valid, and it would be very difficult for anybody to come in. So we're talking about the process, and obviously the company and all of us as shareholders are disappointed that we didn't get the fast track through the first hoop. But that doesn't mean that somebody would come in. It would be incredibly difficult for another party to come in because we are the license holders over the vast majority of the polygon, and certainly the most interesting parts of the polygon. So my answer would be sort of no. I'm sorry, I don't have people's names here. I've just got pre-submitted. I'm sorry, it doesn't show me who's who. We've addressed, I think here, Ignacio, somebody's asked about the current relationship to the Ministry of Mining and the relevant government departments, but there's the company's relationship. But do you just want to be touch again, you know, how many years you've been in country and your relationships with the mining ministry from your previous roles?
Sure. So I've worked in the mining industry for in-house for the last 10 years. First for Freeport McMoran, which is a copper and gold global copper and gold producer that has one operation in Chile called the Labra, and the last 7 years with Albemarle, which is one of the largest lithium producers in Chile, in the world. Apologies, and that has its most important operation, managed operation in Chile. So, and I led that operation for the last 3 years. So I know how the government works, and I've met most of or all of the authorities that we are not going to be engaging in this process. So the relationships are very good. We also know people that could form part of future governments. So we have a very broad network of people that we've either met or worked with before, that should be in support of our strategy.
I think probably what investors want to know, obviously, is that you've had a long and distinguished career within the lithium sector in country. You've had many years of your own relationships with the ministry, and while Steve is extremely respected and well known from his history, obviously Steve is not in Chile, but you're in Chile. It's much easier for you to go and have those, but through Ignacio now we have direct in-country relations, and there is nothing to suppose that the government has any reason not to want Cleantech Lithium to be successful in producing this asset. It's a question of just how we get that procedure and process right in terms of awarding the sale.
Exactly. I've met every officer or government official. We have long-standing relationship with them. I am blocks away or a couple of subway stations away from downtown where most of them work. And actually tomorrow I'll be taking the subway, like a 10-minute ride to get to a meeting with the Ministry of Finance.
Well, we very much appreciate it. I think it's a very good move. I mean, obviously before, but I'm delighted that you're on board, and we have your presence in country to strengthen the team there. On the prescribed questions, Ignacio. So obviously we've had the relationship with Conductive Energy. We're working through various parties there. They've got some interesting corporate activities going on. I think has been put in the press that they've recently announced a potential relationship with DuPont. Maybe just want to talk, obviously you've been engaging a little bit with Conductive Energy. They got some interesting things happening corporately. My understanding is that what they're up to actually would be highly beneficial for us, but maybe you could just give a quick reference to that.
You're correct. What I can share is precisely in the line of what you're saying. We, as it's public, we have already gone and produced lithium carbonate high purity with Conductive, and now they are undergoing some changes. We believe they will be very positive to us to process the remaining eluate that we have with them in the US. So it's just a matter of waiting, and once that is done, we'll continue to process the eluate.
Okay. Can you clarify the company's with the PFS? Sorry, give me one second. I'm just catching up. Contain both parties. Right. So there's a question here we've got, Ignacio, about can we clarify the company's right to the PFS, particularly if it's contingent on the sale progression, and then what options does the company have with respect to publishing it? Is it permissible for the PFS to contain both polygon scenarios? So the other polygon that the government's put doesn't include licenses that we have. So we can't put a PFS out with the government described one. We can, and again, the requirement for the fast track was to have 80%, which we fall slightly short of. But even in their fast track one, an entity wouldn't necessarily have that. So the government just prescribed polygon isn't relevant to a PFS. And for the PFS, you could only look at the licenses that you actually have as a company. What we may choose to do is pick up additional licenses in due course and update it. So that was there. In terms of contingent, it's not contingent per se. And Ignacio, again, I'll turn to you in a second and correct me if I'm wrong. But there's some parts going into it. And in terms of the timeline and what we need to do is say whether we are fast tracked or whether we're going through the process, because that will impact in the development time and the lead time. And so that's going on and being reviewed as I understand it, but we want some clarification. Certainly, I think a clarification on the appeal to be fast tracked before we look to publish the PFS. And that's just pure commercial sense from the company's point of view. But Ignacio, do you want to comment on that and adjust as you feel necessary?
Dan, actually, the polygon, the final polygon is important for the PFS, as that polygon will define whatever we can exploit. And so the resource is actually
constrained
or constrained exactly by the final polygon, and that's why both are tied together. So once we have a definitive polygon, we can update the PFS, which is almost ready. So it is a matter of finalizing the CEOL process and updating that area to the PFS.
But that's the potential resources. But my understanding is that from the PFS, from the numbers in terms of the economics, we can only give claim to what we have.
What Montgomery is saying is that they will attest to what is in the polygon. So even if we have properties that are outside the polygon, yeah, so it's dependent on the polygon, even though we have a defined resource that is larger than the polygon.
Okay, so that comes into, so there's a bit of number crunching coming around, but yes, I mean, it's in good shape, it's ready to go, but let's go through the appeal process, then we can give an update fairly shortly to shareholders after that. Thank you, that's actually very informative for me. Right, does the company perceive any impediment like the recent rejection, and what measures are the company taking to promote a deeper appreciation of the wider benefits to all the stakeholders? I think that's fairly clear. I mean, I don't think there's any wish from the government not to see this go forward. I mean, a lot of people put in the chat rooms, and I try not to get sucked into too many of them, because there are some people very good, and some of it is just wild speculation, and you could spend your whole day going into there. But there is nothing in terms of this process that should lead anybody to think that there is any reason why the government does not want to see clean tech have the licenses and to progress the project. It's not in their interest. We are the most advanced. They stated that they want to have these projects up and running. I think Ignacio 2027 is the government's goal. Was it 26? Yeah.
26.
At 26, which, I mean, they're going to miss. So they want to create jobs. They want to create revenue for themselves. They want to have money going back into the local communities. What we're discussing is a technicality from a bureaucrat in a ministry over a polygon's definition size. And it's unfortunate, and it's regrettable, and it's frustrating, and it's disappointing. And it is painful for all of us who are shareholders. And I'm a shareholder, as everybody knows, in every single round I maintain all my shares from day one. So are we pissed off? To be candid, yes. But the speculation that there's a government and there's some conspiracy and there's some of these other people that post stuff in there, which is just wild conjecture, has no basis. And I don't think we need to promote the wider benefits. The government knows the wider benefits. They want to see this project happen. We've had nothing but support from the government on day one. What we're facing is a technicality over a polygon definition of a line in the sand, effectively, and where we are. But we believe we have some very good arguments as to why what they're proposing doesn't meet their wider lithium objectives. Would that be correct, Ignacio?
That's absolutely correct, Dan.
Thank you. I think it's easier. I'm pretty sure, sorry for paraphrasing it, but it sometimes helps us everyone. There's one about the next raise. Look, guys, we've the last raise pays for the PFS and everything. We actually have a fairly de minimis running cost. The guys are very good at making things stretch. The next raise is the plan is still to go to the ASX. As you can understand, we need some clarity just around this current events. But we do see a future on the ASX. We have over 30-40% of our shareholders there. The valuations are still doing much better. You saw Galan, which is in Argentina, recently got bid for it a couple of times its market cap that the board put down. There's a number of other rumors going around about speculation for M&A activity. So I think rather than having conjecture about that, let's wait and see. There's a comment that AIM is driving the company to zero. I think it's a combination of AIM, frustration in the UK market, flow out of funds. There has been a softening of the lithium price. It's not only clean tech. The vast majority of lithium companies are down 70-80% over the last couple of years. Sadly, we are very much beholden to the global lithium price. Trump's discourse doesn't really help us, but I know Steve and Gordon and Ignacio remain firm believers in the overall march towards net zero and the increase in EV battery demand and battery storage and the wider applications of lithium. And I think if you take a 2 to 3 year view, the lithium price has an extremely positive outlook, which will then, I think, carry up a number of the junior companies until you can get to a point where you're producing and you can look at the revenues and the numbers and get from a multiple. As a junior, you are very much driven by the underlying commodity price. But again, we reiterate our view that we're very much at the bottom of the market here, and we think the market will go into a net deficit in the second half of the year, and it should lead to a price increase. But Ignacio, you've been following this and you're far better informed and educated than I am. What's your views on where the lithium price is going?
So, look, first regarding price, I want to point out to everyone that not only junior companies, but also already producing companies, and actually the two largest companies, lithium producers in the world, have also experienced 75 or 80% reductions in their market cap to date. And that's mainly driven by price. And as you said, Dan, the price forecasts going forward are and the demand forecasts going forward are very optimistic. They're very positive. Demand today is slightly above 1 million metric tons per year, and it is expected that by the end of the decade, it will more than double. It will be between 2.5 or 3 million metric tons. And as you all know, lithium projects are smaller, so they are not a new project that comes online in the future does not really impact offer. So as you say, that there will be a rebound in prices in the future. And our project is looking, and longer term is looking to that demand that is not only for EVs, but also for energy storage, for other applications like electricity, renewable energies that can be supported with lithium batteries. And the demand is there. EV growth is also very attractive, very impressive at the moment in mainly in Asia and developing countries. And that's what we're pointing for. We're sure that when this project comes online, the reality will be very different.
And again, what I'd like to reiterate to our shareholders is that Chile is a free trade country with the US. And even if the US resolves the current temper tantrum over tariffs that they're having with the rest of the world, which I think they probably will do, it has certainly awoken the rest of the world and most of the major industrial companies in the world about the need to really address the security of supply and their supply chain, whoever you are, car manufacturer, battery and industrial partner. And so while it's been painful for the global economy, I think Trump's actions in his first 100 days really strengthens the position of somebody or a company like Cleantech in terms of being able to supply directly into the US market, and for the US and Canada, and to a large extent Europe, which would get dragged into any trade war with China, to make sure that they have supply outside China to facilitate their ambitions within the technological, rare earths, lithium, net zero sectors. So to that degree, while we can never discuss anything, and I get bits of information, I'm aware that we are being approached as a company by a lot more companies from North America and from Canada in terms of potential cooperation.
And so, Dan, just to add to that, Chile has a free trade agreement with the US and also a bilateral tax treaty, also with Europe, with China, and also is also has ratified the TPP. So there are many economies that the company can sell to utilizing Chile's free trade agreements. It's open to the world, not only to one or two countries.
Thank you. That's very helpful. James C, because over the fundraiser, we need to go forward, progress. James, nobody's investing anything at the moment. We're taking some longer term views. As you know, we're talking to a number of potential partners, strategic partners, joint venture partners. We've paid for the bulk of the things that we need to pay for. So we paid for all the testing work with conductive energy. We paid for the PFS. Now, obviously, if this was to drag on for a year or something, we go forward. But the company has actually a very light burn rate. Now that we've paid, the PFS was several $1 million. The conductive energy work was not cheap. That ran into, I think, almost $1 million and a bit. But in terms of the actual operating cost, we're very, very light. So, and we can make things stretch while we resolve this and we find out. But the goal would be to make sure that we find the most non-dilutive scenarios possible for all shareholders. And you've got to remember that, the board all put money in at the pre-IPO, the IPO, which I know would have been at 60. Most of the management have been taking their salaries in equity at much higher prices. So everybody is very focused to minimize any further dilution. And to take the steps to actually make sure that we get the stock price back up to something before we entertain anything like that. Right. Steve M was asking, due to the sale application, the recent share offering is now about will the company look to make any adjustment to the offer? Steve, you can't legally do that. You can't retrade an offer and go back to those parties. In the same way that if we did the offer and then suddenly we had a bid and the share price doubled, we couldn't go back and then sort of up the share price at which somebody went to. So just legally, it wouldn't be possible. We are very appreciative of all the shareholders that come in. We appreciate that everybody is frustrated and disappointed, both at the timelines and the results on the sale. And even irrespective of the results of the sale, we're all very disappointed and frustrated by the AIM market and the liquidity and the market makers and the rush that people have to try and find the price. And all I can say is that we're working very hard in terms of approaching potential new investors on market. This is not for a fundraise, but to market the benefits and why we think the company is so incredibly cheap. I haven't been actively doing that just yet because we wanted to get the application in for the sale. But once we have some clarity on that, depending on which route it is, and they're both very valid, one's just a little bit quicker than the other, we'll be putting some effort back into going out to market the company because we see incredible value in the share price or in the company at today's share price. Right. Sorry, Joseph O. They want to see it. They don't require capital. Ignacio, so would you just want to explain for Joe? We've got a question of whether we have the capital and we don't. None of the smaller companies have the capital to put these projects in. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not what they're looking for. And Chile has hundreds of smaller junior mining companies that come in and pick licenses. What they want to see is that you have the managerial and the technical expertise to put in and essentially the financial expertise to put in a plan to develop a project from early stage exploration, which is where we are now, through the PFS, through the DFS, through bringing in the project partners and the project financing, and then into production. So it's not that they have a requirement that you must have X on the balance sheet. There was a requirement for expenditure, and then for demonstrating that you have a clear path. But do you want to talk a little bit, Ignacio? Sorry, just some of these I'm addressing for you easier. But do you want to just about that, what the government's looking for from companies in terms of financial partnership and resourcing?
Yeah, Dan, you're absolutely right. The government is not looking for companies to have the money in the bank to build a project that is pretty unlikely and that would be unique. Chile has a lot of experience developing mining projects, mainly in copper but also in lithium. What the government wants to see is certainty that the company has the know-how and the managerial experience to get through from exploration, get the funding, and then develop a project properly. And we have those credentials, and that's been admitted by the government. So they're not questioning that.
There's questions about whether it's too detailed. Our application covered off the requirements of the application. It's not that it was too detailed or not too detailed. The question is around the polygon. So we have our licenses. Somebody in the ministry published a polygon over the area. That didn't quite fit with what we've got, and think we have a very good case as to why they're wrong. And if not, we go through the public. But it's not that the application was too detailed. So there's a very valid question here about have any other companies been successful in the sale? And there's a question about hostile bid. Let me come back. So, Ignacio, who else has been successful in the fast tracking?
There were 3 companies or 3 salars were approved to move forward to negotiations, and one belongs to a company called Eramet. It's a large French miner, and the second one is a joint venture between several parties, including Codelco and Eramet, and the third one is 2 junior companies that joint ventured in a salar close to the Bolivian border called Coipasa. Not very well-known companies.
Yeah. So the 2 junior ones were there. So their license area did meet the polygon definition, but again, just to reiterate to shareholders, they were 2 junior companies. They don't have a market cap much larger. They don't think the financing wasn't the issue. It's the path, and the government's not looking for that. It was in their case, their licenses matched the polygons and our didn't. So we've covered that off enough. How vulnerable are we to a hostile bid? Somebody may make a bid, whether you're not vulnerable to that. So obviously the manager has a big position, Regal's got a big position, Athos Capital's got a big position. So, I mean, look, if somebody offered us 10, 20 times, we'll probably have a look at it, but it would be up to you as shareholders. And I can't see that the board would have to evaluate any bid on its merits and feel whether it was anywhere close to something that they thought was beneficial for the shareholders. But we believe that we will be successful in obtaining the sale, whether that is through the fast track process after appeal, or whether that is a slightly longer duration in terms of the standard public tender process. The board is very much of the position that we still maintain that we have a belief that we will be successful in obtaining the sale. And at that point in time, that will give us significantly more value into the company and allow us to enter into conversations with potential offtake partners and strategic partners. We're very confident that this is a robust project, which is economically viable at not only today's lithium price. I think our break even was 4.5, a little bit more. There'll be some inflation in costs, but will be continue to be among the lowest cost producers of lithium in the world in terms of DLE projects. Obviously, the evaporation ponds are slightly lower costs, but when you look at the rest of the world's projects, we're extremely well positioned. We think that having a project in Chile, of the reasons that Ignacio said, in its location to North America and being a free trade country, is extremely valuable. So I can't personally see a scenario whereby Maha, Steve, Gordon, and Johnny would get together and consider anything remotely close to anywhere where we are today. They are as frustrated as all the other shareholders are in terms of the process, but our option is to push forward and continue to argue our case until ultimately we believe we'll have a successful outcome for the company and for our shareholders.
And let me add a little bit of flavor to what you just mentioned.
Please.
Um, I don't know how much our investors know, but there are mainly two routes to produce lithium chemicals. One is through brines and or through hard rock. Several types of hard rock, spodumene, lepidolite, and others. Brine is by far the lowest cost route to produce lithium carbonate. Today, lithium carbonate also is uh, in more demand than lithium hydroxide, which is what you can produce from hard rock. So one of the beauties of brine is that you are in the lowest side of the cost curve. No matter what the lithium price is, it is an attractive project that can move forward. And in terms of our specific project, which I visited 2 weeks ago, um, the infrastructure is very good to get to the project. You can actually go from the ocean, from sea level to the project in 3.5 hours. That's something that you will not find in Australia or in Argentina or in Bolivia. Through a paved road that is roughly 1 kilometer away from the project site, there are other mining operations in the vicinity. So there is access to electricity. There's access to specialized labor. There's water. So the project itself is very attractive. It is brines, which are lower cost. We have proven the process. We have gone all the way to lithium carbonate. In fact, um, that's why we have told the government that we are how far advanced we are. And that's why we believe we can be the next project to get online if we get the CEOL. And we're very optimistic about our arguments regarding the CEOL appeal. And we believe that we can overturn that decision and have approved and go to direct negotiations with the government to sign a CEOL.
Thank you. So just addressing so the release of the PFS, a couple of asking about the PFS. Again, we're waiting for the fast track application and we'll come back, but there are some things that would need to be updated based on what we're doing. So the ASX listing is slightly interdependent on the CEOL. We couldn't publish a prospectus without having clarification of that. So that does impact on the timeline. So we'll know fairly shortly whether we are successful or not, and we can move forward. Sorry, I got the same question from a number of people, so we're putting out that one. There's a question here from ENG about tariffs on eluates. We're not selling the eluate. The eluate's what we were shipping up to Conductive Energy for them to do downstream processing into lithium carbonate. And that was at the moment just for internal. We weren't looking to sell that. But as a free trade country with the US, I don't know, Ignacio, how is the tariff conversations impacting on free trade countries with the US, and how would that potentially impact on lithium supply from Chile? So what's happening with Albemarle and SQM, etc.?
The conversations are ongoing between governments, so between the Chilean government and the US government regarding how any tariffs could apply in the light of a free trade agreement and a BTT agreement between the countries. There are many other countries beyond the US, but also the US that buy lithium. In fact, 90% of demand of lithium today is in Asia. Outside of Asia, we believe Europe is there's a strong demand today and also to the end of the decade. So the US is not the only country that can buy our lithium.
Okay, thank you. That will address from there. So I'm just replying to some of these questions in. Yeah, so Mark H, no, it wasn't to do with having adequate capital. It wasn't to do with adequate management. It really is just somebody drew a line and the line didn't match for us. And we'll go through that process. The PFS, yes, so I know we're hoping for at the end of April, but obviously we were hoping for the resolution for the CEOL application at the early April, and then the government took a few days longer, and they're the government. And so we needed to get some clarity around that for the PFS. So the PFS is in pretty much final form. I think there's some things going back and forth, but we do need to get some clarity on that before we release it. So that would be, I think, in the coming couple of weeks, but will depend on where we stand on the sale. John A is asking how she's been to work out the cost of not being a fast track. I don't think that's been done yet, John, to be honest. Obviously, the company's been very focused on working with Ignacio and the lawyers and the application and things on the ground. And there's some conversations with some potential parties who might like to sort of come and get involved with the company. But I don't think anyone's sat down at this point in time and calculated it out. Not that it's not a valid question or that it's not a valid thing to do. I just don't think there's been a chance to look at it per se. So Steve, no, the PFS and the ASX listing are not contingent on a positive sale resolution in terms of the fast tracking resolution. But if we're going to go on to the ASX, we need to say the process. So we've put an application and it's been rejected. So that needs to be resolved. So as we think it would be beneficial to the company to be going down the fast track process, and given that we expect a resolution from an appeal to be quite quick, it makes sense for the company and it's prudent to delay to find what the result is, because then we know where we stand. And then when we know where we stand, we can go out to investors in Australia, telling them either whether we have the fast track application or we're going through the standard tender process. And then we can explain why we believe that we have the best possible chance through the tender process, because we have all the licenses and effectively it's almost impossible for anybody else to realistically come in. It's just a delay time. It will also have a slight impact on the timing and the financial model in terms of when we would expect to be into production. So they are not dependent on it. They, however, do have an impact on the prospectus. It's just the prospectus. I mean, we can go out and marketing from there tomorrow, and I know who we're going to go to, and we've done a lot of pre-marketing, but you have to have a published prospectus. So all these things do, to a degree, interrelate. Right. Good question from James C. So, Ignacio, if the government is keen for us to go and do it, why is somebody in the ministry published a polygon over the entire area? I think the question is here, there's a difference between having a good relationship and having a legal department that defines up and doors contracts. It's not like you're sitting and having coffee every day and the government approaches things for a standard procedure for everybody. But Ignacio, I think you can see the questions here as well. The question was, if the governments are so keen for CTL to progress and set up a mine, why has their ministry set a polygon that has parts of it with no lithium, or effectively the implication is outside our area? CTL had discussions with the ministry before submission regards to the shape of the polygon. Was this not resolved then? Do you just want to explain what the government will and will not do in the discussions that you can and cannot have with the government?
Well, it is actually a good question, because it's obvious that if you want to develop the industry, you set a polygon someone can comply with. In this case, not only for us, but for most of the companies, the government defined a polygon, or someone within the administrative body of government, let's call it, I think it's better that way, define a polygon that no company could meet. So our exercise, our energies have been focused on explaining why our polygon, which we comply with, is better than the government's, and why the government defined that it is possible to reshape the polygon. Why does this happen? Sometimes people within the administration don't have all the details or the information that they should have in order to, when they set the rules. And that's why usually this can be modified or adapted to reality. And that's why we also believe that there's a good possibility for us in this appeal process.
No, thank you. Well, Ignacio, listen, we are coming to the end of questions. We are under an hour, which is pretty freaking good for us, to be honest, as it runs on. And it's late and it's almost 9 o'clock here in Dubai. So I think the last thing I wanted to bring, first, actually, the last comment, it was Ben Y did a very nice comment. Michael, no, there's no possibility the polygon definition is a deliberate blocking action. We covered those earlier on, so I just submitted. The polygon was the polygon. It's all these statements about them there in government and this thing and some subterfuge there is quite frankly just not. It's not credible.
And just briefly, it's important to remember that this process started with an RFI. Chile has 50-something salars, and the RFI process, after the RFI, the government defined 6 salars that were attractive for perspective for this expedited process, and Laguna Verde was one of those, and it was because of Cleantech's position in it. So there's no blocking action by anyone.
And just remember, Ben Wise put in the CEOL decision outcome does not reflect the hard work and effort put into the submission. I think it's something like 1,200 pages of a document that went through, and we haven't come this far. So we have progressed. There are times when you have a huge disconnect between the share price and the work on the ground. And a lot of these things and processes are quite intricate, and some of them are fairly complex. I obviously get to talk to the company a great deal, and I still, to be honest, find some of this quite difficult to fully understand the processing and the mechanics. And obviously, we're very grateful to have Ignacio now, who has the experience on that one. So I think, Ben, thank you for that, because quite frankly, you know, the company management's come into a bit of kicking. I had some one-on-ones with some large institutional investors. I've come in for a big kicking as well, which is part of the role of being a broker, but it's also painful. I mean, I bought stock in the last round, and then I bought more at 11p. I think it was 30 grand or something. So we're down at 7. So it's disappointing professionally, and it's painful personally. But we are doing everything we can, and we believe that we're in a very strong position. And I think Ignacio is doing a great job. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. So Ignacio, you've been around for a month, and apart from this sort of baptism of fire straight into the CEOL process, you know, what else do you know, sort of comments about your first month in the role?
Well, it's been a great first month. Dan, baptism of fire. I've been in situations like this before.
Apart from not getting the fast track and us coming in for loads of abuse.
Look, it happens. We just need to deal with it. My previous job, we transformed an international arbitration with the state into a huge opportunity for a company to increase production through DLE. So these things happen. We can, with being smart, having the right relationships, explaining the benefits for the country, we can turn these decisions. I visited the site. It is awesome. Beyond being beautiful, the infrastructure is great. I met with the indigenous communities. They are very supportive of the project, which is, by the way, not easy at all in this country to have support from the indigenous communities. Even public support from a few of these indigenous communities. I've met with regional authorities. I've met with national authorities already. We have a great team. We have prepared a very strong appeal. I think all in all, it's been a great month. The future will bring many more good things for those who wait. And I'm sure that we'll put all of our efforts into this appeal, and hopefully next meeting done with our investors, we'll have much more news to talk about.
Ignacio, thank you so much. I know you're going straight here into another meeting with a very interested party in the company. So we thank you very much for your time. And to everybody that's listening, we appreciate the ongoing support, and we will try and do it. We couldn't do one immediately because there were too many open-ended questions, but we will try and do one again in about 2 weeks' time or so. With that, thank you very much to Investor Meet.
That's great. Daniel and Ignacio, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you so that you can provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Thank you once again for your time, and good afternoon, good evening to you all.